Hello, my name is Matthew Deans, and I am the Supported Employment and Project Search Coordinator for the Virginia Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services. During this online seminar, we will be discussing the policies and procedures related to how DARS in Virginia determines who qualifies for DARS funding when it comes to cost services related to a client's individual plan for employment goals. The Virginia Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services works in collaboration with community partners, providing and advocating for resources and services to improve the employment, quality of life, security, and independence of older Virginians and Virginians with disabilities and their families. Transition-aged youth can connect with vocational rehabilitation services in their area through their local high school case managers, or they can call for more information from the local office in their area, or they can have their family or advocates call on their behalf to ask about certain services related to vocational rehabilitation. Employment services help people with disabilities get ready for, find, and keep a job. The agency also partners with a network of community rehabilitation providers, also known as employment service organizations, and these organizations provide employment and vocational services throughout the state. Typically, these services are paid for with DARS assistance. However, without DARS assistance, services are typically paid for by the client or family out of pocket or through some other means. The DARS Division of Rehabilitative Services has elected, as is our option, to consider the financial need of VR clients receiving services. The VR client and family shall share in the annual cost of all VR services provided unless the service or client is exempt. The consumer financial participation amount is subject to the Client Financial Statement, or RS-13, otherwise known as the Financial Participation Test. In understanding the DARS Consumer Financial Participation Policy, all clients are obligated to share in the cost for services unless that service or client is exempt. For example, Project Search services are exempt. However, in addition to Project Search, most clients need a combination of services in order to reach their employment goals that may not be exempt. It's important for families to know that funding for non-exempt services like supported employment should be discussed early in the case. Families should understand how policies around financial participation work and what they can do to document their resources. Cost services are exempt based on the individual. Every student is different, and disability-related needs vary depending on a variety of factors. Supported employment is expensive, and costs can vary greatly depending on many factors. There are several consumer-based exemptions related to the Client Financial Participation Policy that families should understand. Exemption 1 includes VR clients who are a dependent of a family receiving temporary assistance to needy families, or TANF, are exempt from consumer financial participation per agency mandate. Exemption 2 includes clients who are dependent of a family receiving general relief cash benefits who are also exempt from the consumer financial participation policy. Exemption 3 are clients related to this who receive supplemental security income, or SSI, are exempt as well from the client financial participation policy. Clients who receive cash benefits from Social Security Disability Insurance, or SSDI, as the disabled worker claimant or as a disabled adult at least 18 years of age receiving SSDI cash benefits through the SSA Child Disability Benefits Program are also exempt from the Consumer Financial Participation Policy. And finally, family member income from TANF, GR, SSI, and SSDI disabled worker claimant and SSDI Child Disability Benefit cash amounts is exempt from consumer financial participation, but all other family member income is subject to the Consumer Financial Participation Policy. As mentioned, along with consumer-based exemptions from the Financial Participation Policy, there are also exemptions related to the services that one would require in order to reach their goals. For example, the eligibility determination assessments to determine eligibility and VR needs assessment. However, non-assessment services provided under an employment plan are subject to consumer financial participation. Vocational rehabilitation counseling, guidance, and referral services are exempt from consumer financial participation and have no costs. Personal assistance services, otherwise known as PASS, that are necessary for the VR client to participate in the VR program are exempt from the Consumer Financial Participation Policy. And job-related services, including job search, job placement, 90-day follow-up services, and follow-along services, are also exempt from the Consumer Financial Participation Policy. In addition to the services mentioned previously, on-the-job training, auxiliary aids or interpreters for the deaf services or other reasonable communication accommodations, support services such as transportation, dependent daycare, and maintenance, and necessary for the VR client to access diagnostic and evaluation services, and finally, project search services, which include only the costs related to the milestones that clients receive as part of their program in project search, are exempt from client financial participation policies. DARS requires a certain amount of documentation during the client financial participation determination period to document the financial resources available to each client. Most clients require proof of resources by submitting an IRS 1040 tax filing paperwork from the previous year, unless that client is listed as a family of one with no income. No documentation is needed if there was no 1040 last year. And also the documentation needed to prove that a client is receiving SSI, SSDI, TANF, or general relief related to the other client financial document exemptions. Typically, if you don't meet the requirements, it's likely because you either are not a beneficiary of the listed exemptions, such as SSI, SSDI, etc., or your family's listed you as a dependent as an adult and have not considered changing their IRS 1040 filing status for you as a family of one and taking you off as a dependent. You can apply for SSI for many reasons other than just meeting this policy, or speak with your family about no longer claiming you as a dependent and providing a revised 1040 paperwork as documentation. When considering project search and supported employment services for a client, families should understand that project search and supported employment are very similar in the sense that they both have job coaches that work with clients on the job setting in their internships as well as when they're placed in the community. So this may be somewhat confusing to families when talking about the exemptions related to project search versus the non-exempt status that supported employment services have above and beyond the milestone services. The best practice is for folks to anticipate the supported employment supports throughout the project search program because client support needs can change suddenly once they're placed in employment, and a lack of supports will impact the stability on the job and their ability to keep that job. Families should also understand that the cost related to job placement and job training provided through milestones is limited, and supported employment hourly services are often supplemented to help students become stable and maintain their jobs once placed in the community. Once these supported employment services are supplemented, they turn into an hourly rate system outside of the milestone system, and rates can vary depending on the vendor, but often they range from $45 to $70 per hour. And it's not uncommon for up to 10 to 20 hours of supported employment for 2 months needed in order to help a student become stable. So families can expect out-of-pocket costs related to supported employment ranging from, with the example provided, up to $450 or as much as $1,400 depending on the vendor and the number of hours. As we mentioned, Project Search is program funded through a milestone system. This is a method of using specific points or milestones that signal the start date, end date, and the need for budget payments. Funding focuses on outcomes that must be reached in order to achieve success, and each milestone has specific services and activities that are provided and captured within the Project Search model for each site. Each milestone has a unique payment amount that does not change within the given year of enrollment. For example, last year's payments ranged from $612 for enrollment, $918 per internship. Milestone 3 for job placement was $1,887, and the last milestone 4 for closure was $1,020. The services and supports provided in Milestone 1 include those related to program enrollment for clients who are starting out in the project search site. During this milestone, it's not uncommon for students to receive initial school and home visits to meet the family by the job coach, providing intake and service plan development services, observations of students in their community or classroom and business site. They may also do summer travel training if needed to help them get independently to and from the project search site once they start. They may also assist with immunizations, health exams, or whatever that it's related to the particular project search site for the students as required by the Human Resource Department. This does not necessarily include the cost related to immunizations and health exams. Often there is a cost related to these depending on the project search site. And lastly, students may receive services from the job coach to help assist them during the orientation process at the project search site. The services and supports related to Milestone 2 is broken down into 3 different internship trainings. During this time period, often there are assessments provided by the job coach in the classroom and the business to identify interests and preferences on their job goals and their training locations. They may look at certain skills or effective instructional strategies that may be supportive for the client in order to learn and be trained in the job site. Internship development will include meeting the student, determining what their specific needs are, and arranging for tours of the departments, identifying specific job duties, and completing task analyses for each job internship site. During the internship, job coaches will often be involved in coaching and assistance with the site accommodations or modifications, developing natural supports at the project search site, and developing the mentor-client relationship. Review of supervisor evaluations with manager and student. Daily, weekly, and even monthly progress notes are provided as well during this time period. And there's also reporting out on student progress during each project search milestone change point, as well as during the monthly meetings. And also during this time period, it's not uncommon for job coaches to perform duties related to developing a job in the community and helping them become placed in a paid employment that occurs during the school year. The services and supports provided to help the student reach the Milestone 3, or job placement in the community, is related to helping the student assist in the developing of their resumes and interviewing skills, performing job development in the community with the student who may or may not be offered a job at the host business. And typically these activities for job development occur in the springtime after their first internship. Job coaches will often connect the student with coordinators for work incentives and benefits, and there may be a cost involved for services related to the work incentive coordinator services. And job coaches will also assist students with employment applications, travel to interviews, and writing thank you letters. And also, they will be reporting weekly and monthly progress notes to the team as well as to the student. The final milestone is reached, otherwise known as Milestone 4 or closure, when the services related to job site training occurs prior to the end of the school year, and ensuring that all workplace accommodations or site modifications have been completed, developing natural supports at the job site, and facilitating follow-through with benefits planning and work incentives. Once the student reaches stability and their case is ready for closure from DARS, no longer needing services, and meeting all other requirements related to a case closure, the student has reached the final milestone and has become successfully employed in the community. As mentioned before, there are several common cost services that are related to project search that are not exempt from the client financial participation policy. As mentioned, medical testing, immunizations, or any health exams that may be required by the host business at the project search site. Transportation, if not provided by the school, is also assumed to be the obligation of the client. There may be costs related to uniforms to participate at the host business for that project search site, and also any type of assistive technology, therapeutic support such as behavioral supports, or any other services that are not included under the milestones. Families should expect that explanations and discussions about DARS policy should be open and honest with their counselors. All clients are obligated to share in the cost of certain services but we encourage families to apply regardless of their concerns about funding. There are steps families can take, as mentioned, to obtain funding if at first they're not eligible based on their resources. DARS is committed to working with them throughout their case to help them get what they need to be successfully employed. Counselors will work with families to understand and explain the DARS financial participation policies and how to obtain funding as needed. In providing guidance to DARS counselors should discuss how the Consumer Financial Participation Policy defines family. Also, counselors should discuss how certain changes on the Client Financial Statement, or RS-13, will impact students' obligation to share in the cost of services. It's important that counselors keep track of the clients who are obligated to share in the cost of non-exempt services, monitoring their progress on a regular basis, providing reminders of what they need to do to obtain funding for non-exempt services. If they get stuck, it's important that they let us know, as we can help with this process. And finally, VR counselors will review the policies related to financial participation policies with families, and be sure to ask and understand what exemptions are involved that determine your financial participation obligations.